Hi, everyone. Welcome to another session of Campaign Connect, our two-day global virtual event. My name is Brittany Kiefer. I'm the Creativity and Culture Editor at Campaign. Today's session is all about creativity in isolation and beyond, and what might creativity look like going forward in our new environment. First, I want to introduce our panelists today. We've got a great lineup. We have Vicky McGuire, who's the Chief Creative Officer of Havas London. Chaka Sobani is the Chief Creative Officer of Leo Burnett. Laura Bombach is the new Chief Creative Officer at Grey London. And Jim Piercy is Group Creative Director at the Trust at Wall Street Journal Barron's Group. So before we begin, I also want to thank our partners, all of our partners who have helped make this event possible over the past 2 days, and especially to the Wall Street Journal and Barron's Group. Now, it's been a strange old time to work in the creative industries over the past couple months in lockdown. There's been a lot of restrictions that the industry has had to grapple with, from production to just not being with their team. But I wanted to start on a positive note and ask our panelists for an example of creativity over the past couple months that have really stood out to them, whether that's an ad or maybe a non-traditional form of creativity that they didn't expect. Vicky, do you want to start?
God, it's batshit crazy times. Um, and I didn't think whatever it was 10 or 11 weeks ago that we'd be in lockdown, and I didn't think it had gone on this long. And I've had a bet with the guys on our reception that I bet 10 quid that we'd be back within 2 weeks. So I've definitely lost that bet. But it's one of those things, isn't it? It's kind of like, necessity is the mother of creativity, if you like. And I think some of the work that we've been seeing, just not only in our own industry, but kind of like the speed of change and the way that some brands and some people have adapted has just warms the cockles. It's been like heartwarming. The way that people like who we got with, the way that Barber changed all of their production from making jackets to making kind of PPE. The way that Brewdog and others have kind of like changed their production model to make kind of hand sanitizer. The way that people like, the way that ITV gave over all of that dead space to the country to say their thank yous, and the way that Channel 4 have kind of like suddenly from nowhere kind of like conjured up the Grayson Perry Art Club every week, which I love, and has just got the nation kind of like falling in love with creativity again, while most of them are in lockdown, has been amazing. So they're just a few examples off the kind of like the top of my head that just makes me think, oh, it's not dead, it's alive. It may be thriving in back rooms and shitty boxes like this, but something's going on, and it makes you dead proud.
Yeah. What do you think, Laura? What's been a highlight for you?
You know what? I think, I mean, there have been so many wonderful little gestures. I was chatting to Mitch Oliver earlier on today, and she, some of the things that they've been doing, like, for example, looking at what they can do with Pedigree to help walk dogs of people who, might be shielding, for example, like small gestures from brands and from other humans. I think the fact that Ocean Outdoor has given over 50 grand's worth of outdoor media to graduate students that started to go up today, I think that is amazing, because, if we're just focusing on our industry for a second, not the enormous rest of the world, there are thousands of graduates who've paid an enormous amount of money for their degree, and their way in doesn't exist at the moment to our industry, right? None of those ways in. People who have sort of self aggregated and formed little units when they've been on furlough. um there's a whole book crit kind of scheme going on, which just started on a Google Doc. And I think that kind of support for the young people in the industry has been super inspiring. And, there've been some great, you mentioned a lot of them, Vix, but, there are some great pieces of work as well that have, you know, launched over this time.
Yeah. What about you, Chaka?
Um,
Uh, I I've been kind of I love how, I suppose, in telly in particular, in TV production, and I suppose what we're consuming at large as a country, as a culture around the world, all of the things that we've been told you can't do or you shouldn't do have kind of been blown out of their ass, and I love that. I love that you can watch Have I Got News for You, and you've got the presenters in their room, and there's no canned laughter. There's no, well, not canned laughter. There's no audience there, so they're bouncing jokes against dead space and dealing with it as best they can. And I was reading today about, and there's such an insane spirit of generosity, but like the Emmerdale production crew are sharing kind of their learnings. They're a couple of weeks ahead with the EastEnders of like how best to get back into production, how that the different types of creativity. So there's going to be like, so by the way, I'm not a massive Emmerdale fan or anything, but I love all that they're looking at. Maybe I am. No, actually, I love it.
Of course you are.
But for all of them, but how they are looking at like single character episodes, and not just in terms of broadcast telly, but I suppose what it's done to influencers, editorial. Obviously, there's a lot of neg stuff of how we're getting our news. I think certain institutions like the BBC have just literally risen above, and the importance of those institutions. I mean, I'm not going to get onto what's it called, a soapbox, but like the NHS, like the BBC, and the importance of them, and how they're just cutting a rug through all of the noise. It's just amazing. And new voices that have come up, and voices that we expected to get certain bits of leadership from and haven't, and sort of new, what's it called? New voices in creativity. It's just a buzz, and every day it's slightly different, and there's new things, and yeah, it's amazing, actually.
Jim, have you had a favorite moment or piece of work that emerged over the past few months?
Well, firstly, I'm also well out of the office, return to work sweepstake. But yeah, there's been some like amazing stuff. But going all the way up to kind of what LVMH have done and Nike have done in terms of like PPE and donations to hospitals. But I think all the way down to kind of much smaller, independent like activism stuff, like what Johnny Banger does. And I've got friends making PPE in their garage at the moment. What I will say is that it's not hasn't really surprised me, because I think if there is any industry that is equipped to deal with this like fast changing situation, it's the creative one, because it's what we do every day. Like, we are problem solvers by nature. And so I think, to the previous speaker's point, like, it's been incredibly like encouraging to see the response across like the vast like swathe of the industry.
Mm. In terms of production, there's obviously been lots of restrictions on what you can make, how you can make it. Film shoots weren't able to happen in the same way, and yet so many agencies and clients got around those restrictions to continue making work. I wanted to ask all of you, what kind of craft trends have you noticed emerge that might continue or you think should continue going forward? Chaka, do you want to start?
Um, yeah, Britt, I mean, you mentioned production. One of the things that I've sort of personally loved is a return to detail, and really talking about the detail in production, pre-production, production, post-production, but also ideation right at the start of that, and it being a lot less, not necessarily siloed, but instead of a kind of a baton pass of things starting collectively, we're just about to start on the production of something that's going to be, it's completely CG generated. It wouldn't have been the creative necessarily that we would have necessarily gone to in pre-COVID times. But the challenge has been, unsurprisingly, it's not about the restrictions, it's make it really bloody brilliant, firstly. But talk to the right people. I mean, again, this is such a sucking eggs thing to say, but talking to the right people at the right part, which is basically at the start, and co-creating it as a bigger crew, gives you the chance not only to just get something done, but to make it brilliant. Take it from being, oh, well, we're just getting something out, versus no. One of the things that we've been talking about is again, we're all saying this to within all of our own agencies, is it's no reason for the work not to be bloody brilliant. So I've really enjoyed, I think, and it's not we haven't done it intentionally over the past decade or whatever, but we've had the luxury of being able to go, oh, someone else is taking care of that, or we'll get to that. As opposed to, no, man, you've got to get clicked on right from the start, and you've got to nut it out right from the beginning. So for me, I think that I've really enjoyed the return to real production craft from start to finish.
Yeah. Laura, have you noticed something similar?
I think so. It's certainly we're not relying as much on, you know, a script or what have you that's been half, you know, kind of half written, or the bare bones are there and you're expecting to figure everything out, you know, with the director, with the money, with the incredible shoot, with the, you know, all the stuff that goes around that. It has to be much more pared back and therefore much more considered. But you know, the thing that I'm really loving actually is I've seen a load of really beautiful copy.
Mm,
And I think that's wonderful, because you forget that copy is half, if not more, of what it is that we do. And you know, often you can hide a terrible idea in some really beautiful art direction and kind of expensive effects and you know, megastars or whatever. But actually, just really great copy is so
can you give
simple.
an example of that?
Yeah, well, look, you know, not to blow smoke up his ass, because I'm sure he'll be listening, but you know, like the copy that Niels's team at Uncommon has written for the sense of humanity, those candles, I just thought that was,
Mm.
I mean, that was just a really fantastic, another example of a really fantastic idea, but the copy there was just beautiful.
Yeah, for anyone who missed that, Uncommon made some candles, scented candles with Earl of East, and each one was scented some for a place that we miss in lockdown, so like the cinema or the local, and the ads that went along it side it were really lovely and well written.
Yeah, yeah, really good, really
Jen,
good.
what have you noticed in terms of craft and you're working with an in-house team? Has it changed how you work with your production partners?
I mean, it's certainly changed like my role significantly in the team. You know, as somebody who spends probably almost up to a third of his time on the road, like being in one place, and you know, to previous comments, you know, what a lot of our work happens, you know, on shoot, and obviously that's not the case anymore. You know, we've done remote shoots, and we've done a recent campaign with the Motor Valley Festival in Italy that moved to digital. So there's been a lot of kind of pivots on that side. What I think has been interesting, though, certainly what I've noticed is a kind of increase in pace, and that's kind of a genie that I wouldn't want to put back in the bottle. Like the dynamism that I've seen from certainly from my team over the last 3 months is has been incredible. And if anything, we're kind of busier now than we have been.
Why do you think the pace has increased?
I'm not sure actually, although you know, I think there is something to do with remote structure, maybe that demands kind of a different level of attention. Um, but certainly, I think we're also responding to conditions, you know, like day to day. I mean, we put a white paper report out about COVID kind of 3 weeks into lockdown, and even at that point, it was a situation that was changing daily. And I think as creatives, it's kind of imperative that we're across that. And it's such a fast moving situation that I think that's playing into client concerns and messaging, and therefore the things that land on our desk.
Mm. Vicky, have you encountered any big production challenges or just challenges in terms of the making of work? And can you talk about how you got it done?
I think as soon as we went into lockdown, I think everything that we would, you know, to Laura's point, everything that we would have relied on as kind of like a tried and tested way just went out the window.
Mm.
I think, you know, that I think, you know, you weren't, everything comes into play when you get that kind of like, when you get that first brief, which is what is possible, what is achievable, what do we want our punter to think and feel, you know, what is a cult, you know, good work isn't just great creative, it's where creative meets culture and meets context. You know, look at the environment we find ourselves in, is this messaging right? So all of those things kind of like come together and inform how you're going to approach kind of like what you can do with the restrictions on us. But like I said before, you know, we're great when we're given a problem. You know, that's when advertising and, you know, the creative brain comes into its own. And, you know, and to take kind of one of Jim's earlier points, you know, creativity can change at speed, but this industry is not known for its fast reactions to things that are going on. You know what I mean? You know, I genuinely still think that a lot of the times we are behind the curve, especially when we come to kind of, you know, diversity, women, all of those things. We move at a glacial pace, but this has really, I've been surprised at how fast we've moved. So if we have a brand that has, let's say, connection as part of its DNA, then it's perfect because we can reach out to advocates and beyond, and we can get great work out, like, you know, like the Virgin Media stuff, where you can actually watch people kind of like crowdsourcing stuff, and it's just like, oh, actually, that's great. I would love to watch that again. There's some interesting. I thought there'd be more animation, but the interesting animation stuff there is out there is like, you know, probably some of the best that I've seen for a few years, which is good. Copy, to Laura's point, there is some beautiful writing coming out, and to be perfectly honest, when everything else is stripped away from that, when all you're left with is a page of type or moving type on a social post like Nike's just put out, oh my God, is that amazing. So I'm loving that, and I've been moved, you know, more than once over lockdown by some beautifully crafted copy. But you know, but you reacted for context. It's like the Durex stuff we've just put out on kind of let's not go back to normal. You know, that wasn't even on the table 4 months ago. This is, we're reacting to stuff that's coming out, and the speed at which we've done that without a drop, I would say, in craft is just blown me away.
I want to just remind our viewers that you can submit any questions you have through the chat box, and we'll try to get to them throughout the session. But on that note about reacting to stuff, during this time we've started to see a lot of advertising that looked and sounded a bit the same, because a lot of it was addressing this time that we're living in, and facing production restrictions, just trying to address the mood of the nation. Was there a danger to kind of saying what everyone else is saying? And what do you think is the right tone to strike as we're starting to maybe come out of lockdown and return to a bit more of normal life? Vicky, what do you think about that?
I think, I mean, you know, I think we're one of the quickest industries to pull ourselves up when we start kind of crafting a new genre. And that piece, that kind of how to do a COVID ad that came out kind of like, I think literally 5 weeks into lockdown, I think, was just, you know, use the words now, comma, more than ever. You know, tinkle of pianos, shots of that, you know, and you're like, oh my God, that's brilliant. This puts a stake in the ground of let's remember why we're doing stuff. I think when brands get it right, and got brand guardians like we are get it right, we know what our brand's role is in the world, right? So we know when they can lean in and have a conversation. We know when they can tell people to stay home. You know what I mean? We know when we can say thanks and we mean it, rather than kind of like stop that COVID bandwagon, I want to get on.
Yeah.
Some brands have done it beautifully, and others have just missed the mark. You know, some work I'll applaud, and then other times I'm just, you know, oh, look at that. There's an insurance company telling me now more than ever I need a, you know, a life insurance ad now more than ever. Fuck you. So it's just, you know, it's our job to find that tone, and to kind of like, and to handhold our clients, you know, steer them in the right way of any messaging that comes out in this time.
How do you know what the right balance is? Because I'm sure the people making this work, everyone's well-intentioned and they want to show solidarity with what the public is going through, but how do you know when it's your brand's place to speak in a time of crisis?
If you know your brand well, if you know what your brand's DNA is, if you've got a really clear idea of where this brand can play in the world, and you know your customer really, really well, then that's perfect. And that allows people like Paddy Power to put out stuff. You know what I mean? That allows, some really, that allows kind of, I'm just trying to think of some more examples. It allows, I don't know, Nike to tell you to stay home, or it allows Nike to tell you that not, don't do it. But then other times when you're being, kind of like, harangued by a life insurance company, or you've got a cheese telling you to stay home, or everybody that uses now comma more than ever, you need that barbecue or pizza, then you're like, mate, read the room. But then, customers are really, really savvy. And if they don't like the way that a brand is operating, then, they go somewhere else. And that's the strongest thing they can do.
Laura, I can see you nodding. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think Vicky pretty much covered everything, but I think she's absolutely right that if you know your brand well, and I would say, whether it's called a brand purpose or it's called your point of view or the difference that you want to make in culture or whatever it is that you hold central to your brand and your DNA, if you know that, then you know when it's the right time to step into those conversations. And also in what way, am I stepping into the conversation around COVID, but with a mental health lens, or with a pet lens, or telling people to stay at home lens, or an educational lens, actually, telling people around the safety measures that we need to put in our supermarkets or what have you. You will know the right thing to do, you and your agency. But it's there are so many cases of just really, really inappropriate, as you said, now more than ever, whether that's a garden parasol or now more than ever you need a new sofa. I'm like, well, that's kind of true, but like, it's not really. Please don't talk COVID at me.
Jim, did you have to think about this when you were, at the Wall Street Journal? Was that something that you had to take into consideration for your brand?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, because the work that me and the team do is for our clients, right? So we don't make work for the Wall Street Journal, but the Wall Street Journal, where that's really important is context. There is clearly has been a kind of flight to quality in terms of news publishers, which has been obviously good for us. And we've seen kind of 50% uptake in like site visits and uniques, but the reality of it is that our approach with our clients hasn't changed. To previous points, that authenticity is always key. Like, brand has to have like license to talk about themselves in a certain way, and you're right, customers and consumers are really savvy on that, I think, now more than ever. Humility is obviously like a huge part of that, and being hypersensitive probably now to kind of economic and societal changes that affect brands and businesses, and then by extension their customers. And then I guess utility for us is one of the things that we speak about, and that's probably one of the most important things, because in that customer brand value exchange, to talk the kind of horrible marketing terms, like what is on the other side of that? If you're asking for somebody's time or money or effort, what is it that you're offering them? And I think we have to ask ourselves that for all the work that we do for the brands that we work with every time.
Yeah, I remember at the beginning of the crisis, a lot of brands kind of came under fire for doing the, separation of the logo, or just making what appeared to be more tokenistic gestures. Chaka, did you have any moments over the past few months where you've had to grapple with some of these challenges beyond production, like in striking the right tone, or in creating work that would resonate?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with everything that the ladies and Jim have said before, and I think we sort of got to I think we all got to a very simple starting point, which is, what's the purpose of what you're trying to say? And and particularly at the beginning of lockdown, and even now potentially, the key question was, how are you of help and how are you of service? And if you can't answer those, if you're not playing to that, then frankly, fuck up, because it's no time for any other messaging. And actually, I don't think it was about, and I don't think it is at the moment, even though we're sort of berating ourselves, and yeah, absolutely, those sort of, the COVID advertising. It's not about looking at it purely in the context of advertising. It's looking at it in the context of what's going on in the world, obviously. And there were messages, you know, I remember Tesco's doing a thing probably a week into lockdown where it was really informative, and it was about, these are the things that we're doing. And I sat at home as a punter going, okay, and they were instructing me, educating me as to like what I need to do. Okay, so that's how I go shop. Okay, cool. So you're taking care of that so that I'm going to be okay. So the concept of all the messaging has completely changed. And the thing that I found really interesting, well, a number of things, is one, we've always talked about in this industry relevancy, and we struggle to be relevant. And I think what it's done, what it's forced, is listening within this advertising echo chamber and amongst ourselves and twittering away, and actually look at the world. You've got to be plugged into it the entire time, be feeling the beat of it, feeling the heartbeat of it. And the brilliant thing about it is that there is a lot of hope and a lot of optimism, because it's about the human spirit and human psychology. And the thing, this is on a personal level, that I was really surprised by was, I remember when it all kicked off thinking, shit, we're going to hit a really long period where our communication is going to be more informative, it's going to be a little bit more serious, it's going to be, and then, without getting all Pollyanna about it, there's the beauty of the human spirit that comes through, which is, in the biggest tragedies you need lightness. In the biggest tragedies, the human spirit look for hope, and you smile in those moments as well. It doesn't mean that you're laughing at the situation, but you need moments of lightness. And actually, it doesn't mean you have to be very sensitive, but from, I think, a starting point where I thought we were going to be on this really narrow track for a really long time, really quickly it started to open up, and actually messages of hope with a little bit of wit, with not, as I said, really delicate balance of, it's not making light of the situation, trying to give hope and optimism to people, the right brands talking in the right ways. You know, are you a brand that stands for joy? Jesus Christ, man, we need it more than ever. And there's a real role to step into that way, and it doesn't need to be thought about for a year, it needs to be acted on now. And that's the thing I've loved, is that, and it's a really live debate. It's like working on a newspaper, you know, it's got that thing of like, is this right today? It might not be right tomorrow. And this beautiful flexibility that goes, what might be right this week, this hour, this second, might not play right next week. And we can have the ability to go, and it's not even the balls, but to go, okay, things have changed. If we go to you know, if there's a second spike and we go back into lockdown, we're not going to return to the same bit as the fear that we had in the first bit. It's not going to be great, but obviously we go into it more informed. I don't know what the heartbeat of that's going to be, but I mean, I don't want the second spike to happen, by the way. But if it does, fucking hell, what a purveyor of doom. But if it does happen, I think we don't know the answer, and that's a lovely thing. And I think it takes away our arrogance to go, we have all the answers. We don't. What we do really well, if we're smart, is we listen and we react to that. So I hope that answers what you said. I went on a bit of a ramble, but yes, daily we've had those conversations, but I think we've kept it to a very simple set of criteria, which actually is a very human set of criteria. You know, how are you turning up? Are you of help and service? Are you true to the brand? Is it the right thing to say? Are you saying it in the right tone?
As creative leaders, you know, so much of the magic of a creative department is really spontaneous and serendipitous, and you might be in the office and you have a conversation with someone and that sparks an idea. But we're away from our offices now, we're away from our teammates, for creative teams, they're away from their partners. How do you continue to motivate people and inspire them? And especially when we're in this time of crisis, there are people who are facing furloughs or job losses, or their friends have been, you know, made redundant, and there's so many worries about health and everything else. And you know, how do you motivate someone when they're in a huge time of uncertainty and fear, and they're not physically with each other? This is an interesting question, especially for Vicky and Laura, who have just recently, in the past few months, and even more recently for Laura, started new jobs. Vicky, maybe do you want to kick us off and talk about how you've continued to do that?
I was 8 weeks in the office, right, when lockdown struck. So I'd managed to find where the toilets and the kettle were, but I'd already started to get round kind of like my crew, and I got a very clear way of land, which is I wasn't going to kind of like let it, you know, just kind of like find my way around and kind of beard stroke for a couple of months and just, I was just like, that, fuck it, I'm going straight in. I'd already done 3 months gardening leave and it killed me. Right, I can't just sit at home. I need to be doing something. That's just kind of the way I am. But you know, this is, you know, motivating teams and just getting the best work out of, you know, best work out of kind of your department, you know, is no real difference. You just you let them find the way that works best for them. Right. So you know, I think I've always said, if you're an extrovert, I'll find you a stage. If you're an introvert, I'll find you a corner. That kind of hasn't changed. It's just a matter of finding, you know, where, you know, throwing my arms around people that are feeling a little bit wobbly, and also knowing that we're all in it together. So, and especially, God, when you lay on things like homeschooling, you're like, wow, you know, all bets are off. All I was saying to my clients is just give us a little more time, give us a couple of days extra. We're just finding our way. And what I was saying to kind of our crew is find your way, find your pattern, find your beat, and then constantly kind of checking in an almost annoying way. But it was like, shit, I've got another call with Vicky in a minute. I just want to see, I want to see their houses. I want to see their kids. I want to see their dogs. I want to kind of get to know and kind of like, you know, and do as much as I can to help them. And that's transpired in, fuck, maybe I get my first call at 7:30 in the morning because some people are working before their kids get up. Yeah, sometimes I get my last call at 8, 9, you know, plus at night because some people are working when their kids have gone to bed. We make it work. Like I said, you know, creativity always finds a way. And when I see kind of like, you know, all the youngsters in the industry working on ironing boards because they're having to, you know, they just rent a room in a house. When I see that the guys that are furloughed set up their own little agency or go and volunteer to kind of, you know, to make PPE or, you know, make handmade signs for small shops because they haven't got the, you know, they haven't got the skills to do a nice 2 meter apart sign and stuff like that. You know, people, it just genuinely bring out the best in people, and the busier you are, the better, you know, the better it is. So keep people busy, keep people active, take the pressure off them to kind of like to perform in the traditional ways. And I've always believed that. I've always said, for the, you know, however many kind of agencies I've been in, find your crew, find your way of working, tap in, take the pressure off yourself, and just kind of let's do the best job we possibly can. And that's kind of what we've been doing. I mean, I hated it. I need people around me. I don't like working from home. I love working in coffee bars and places, and I just, this just blew me away. But fuck, I mean, I've set up 3 other companies while I've been sitting here. I've tidied my room. My dog adores me now. You know, and I'm kind of getting a little bit Stockholm syndrome in my you know, my spare bedroom, even though you can hear the toilet flush next door. You know, you adapt and you adapt quickly, and I'm quite proud of my crew for doing that.
Laura, you're also in a transitional period, starting a new job. What's it been like?
You know what? It's been utterly fascinating in a way. And, you know, having hit a brand new job only 2 weeks ago, right in the middle of lockdown, you know, I've not even seen inside the office because the only time I came to the office, you were doing a pitch, Vicky. And so we had to have our eyes closed and we got shoved into a room.
Fuck,
I don't even know what the bloody place looks like from the inside. So, you know, so that, and there have been absolutely brilliant things. I think in a weird way, it's been very leveling because everyone's at home. I've done exactly what Vicky's done. The first thing I did was sit down with my team and really get to know how they're feeling about lockdown and what they need. And, you know, and what the one thing that I can do for them to make their work better, like, you know, forever, but particularly now, so that I kind of knew where to focus. Because the downside that I found from remote working is that those little tiny 5-minute conversations that used to be able to have are now scheduled for 15 minutes or half an hour. Actually, everything just takes a little bit longer. You don't want to cut someone off halfway through when you're in a really important conversation about someone's well-being or a great idea and go, sorry, I've got to jump to my next meeting. So I think managing that has been a little tricky. But I've absolutely loved kind of meeting everyone face to face. And one of the first things, again, that I put in place with my team, but actually that, the whole of Grey has put in place now, because it was really chaotic. It's just some core working hours with a nice big break in the middle of the day, so that everyone knows not to book any meetings, and so no one's bothered. And if you want to sit down and have lunch with your family, or go for a walk, or what have you, there's time there where no one's going to interrupt you. And then also at the beginning and the end of the day to give people some space, which has worked so incredibly well, and just means people feel a bit more in control of their day. Because I think previously it was calls all the day, all the night. Some people are morning people, some people are afternoon people, and the result was actually, as an agency, everyone was on all the time and on multiple channels, on Teams, on WhatsApp, on email, always worried that you've kind of missed something in some channel. So we've tried to put a little bit almost of structure around it, so to just to make it feel a little bit more comfortable, and that's worked really, really well. So I know my team love it, but the entire agency is absolutely loving that at the moment, and really respecting it, which is great.
It's been said that we're going to be moving to a new way of working. We might see a lot more people working remotely. None of us are returning to the office as soon as we probably anticipated. So, and you might also have a case of some people working from home and some people back in the office. Chaka, what do you think? What kind of support that you can give to team members? What kind of extra support do you need to show them?
Well, I think the great thing is that the last 10 weeks have shown that we can adapt to any way of working. And I think all the things that if someone had said 3 months ago, this is where you're gonna have to pitch on Zoom, you'd have been like, shut up, that's ridiculous, we'll wait. And yet you find yourself with silly backgrounds and, dressed up in t-shirts and God knows what else. You try and find your theatre wherever you can. So I suppose the first thing is that I have faith in the fact that whatever the solutions are, there are solutions. And also the fact that unless there is genuine honesty about what's working and what's not working, you can't make it, or not even make it better, but you can't keep improving it. So it's not just a case of, I think even with this, a lot of the conversations we're having in the agency weekly isn't like, okay, so we found our groove, we're all good now. It's like, okay, so are we getting the best out of, like, is this the best way to review work? Is this the best way that people are getting together? Are there too many people? Are there too? And I think that constant dialogue is going to be important as we start, as you said, creeping back in, because I think we don't know how different people are going to react. I think some people right now who are potentially feeling like, yep, I want to go back in, that might change the minute they start, 2 days on the tube, you might freak out a little bit, flip reverse. And I don't think there are no sort of standards that you can categorically say that's the way it's going to be. So I think at the heart of it, and again, it's obvious thing to say, is you have to have the flexibility to be able to accommodate how people are going to work, and not just leave it to chance, but look at it, have a bit of an aerial view on it and go, okay, well, those people need work like that. They're enjoying it. Okay, how can we pull it all together? And it doesn't mean that it's going to be completely sporadic. There might, to Laura's point, just even things like we're going to put a break in the middle of the day for like, an hour and a half. These things we're all crave. That was, again, unsurprising. We all craved routine the minute we went into lockdown. Like, it took me a week to get out of wearing pajamas, but then I was like, oh my God, I'm horrified by looking at my face without makeup. It's quite macro, isn't it, when you're on these bloody things? And I needed the routine to get up, get showered, put on some clothes, just to walk 6 foot to get into my bedroom. Do you know what I mean? It's those things that, and we're going to keep discovering those, and we're going to get to halfway houses. So there's a lot of stuff to come. And I think the best way, personally, I think the best way to think about it is we don't know. There's practical supports like, IT and all that stuff, which thankfully they're all sort of in hand and work really, really well remotely. Thank God for tech being at the level that it is. Jesus Christ, this would have been a bloody nightmare 10 years ago. So I feel pretty confident that there'll be hiccups. Of course there will be, but I think we'll be all right. We'll be absolutely fine. And long term, you're right. I don't think it's going to be a complete return to whatever this new normal is. I haven't got a bloody clue what it is, but I think it will have taken parts of all the best bits, hopefully, and it will come up with something that hopefully keeps on moving and gets us out of actually like just one way of working, I hope.
The way that your team works, and have you had to come up with different steps to take to support them as they're going through this?
Sorry, was that to me? You broke
Yeah.
up a second there. Yeah, so look, I think the optimistic side of me likes to think that this crisis, although it's completely unplanned and that unprecedented word, probably gives us an opportunity to make some fundamental changes to the way, like, not just the industry works, but the world works, but for the better. Will businesses look at things like real estate and travel, business travel differently? I would like to think so. But as others have said, I think what we've done crucially is we've proved what's possible when situation is difficult, and then and creativity is still just about managing those challenges and those problems.
We have a good question from one of our attendees. They say, if you were to go back in time and retain all the learnings of the COVID crisis, what would you have done differently when the COVID crisis broke out? And I think that's relevant because a lot of what we're talking about is how we're living in this time of uncertainty now, and we don't know what the rest of the year will bring. So that could be really valuable to think about. Vicky?
Wow, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Shit, I don't know. I mean, apart from I'd have probably rubbed more stationery. Genuinely don't know. I don't know. Because I think, it's like anything, it changes. This crisis has changed on a, if not weekly, of a daily basis. So your whole experience, there's been about three, I've ridden so many kind of like waves in the last 10 weeks. It's just been ridiculous. And I think that even tech has started to move. When we first got onto Teams, you just had a window of 4 people, and now they're expanding. So I don't know. My big thing really is just here's my big fear is I don't believe that this crisis, and this might be going off at a tangent, so I don't know if I'm answering the question or not. This has not been a level playing field. The way that the disease has hit and the way that it's kind of like affecting our industry is not a level playing field. So it's all right if you are in your country pile with your spare bedroom and your office and great internet. Brilliant. You've had a great time. And I can see it when I talk to people around the industry, who've got great tans. You know what I mean? And you're just kind of like, you fuckers, you've got a garden. But then, the youth, which is the lifeblood of our industry, those kids that are still paying off their kind of like their school fees are renting a room, who are working, sitting on their laptops in their bedrooms, trying to share cheap Wi-Fi when 7 other people are trying to work from home in different rooms as well, are having a mare, right? So, what would I do if I could? I would try, God forbid it happens again, just to make sure that there are spaces that are socially distant and safe that teams that are struggling can go to. I was quite shocked at my response. I always thought that I would be kind of like, I'd be one of the good guys, and if I was in the war, I'd have joined the resistance, or I'd be in the kind of the communications industry. No, mate, I'm total black market. I knew exactly where I could get toilet roll from. I knew exactly where I could get food from. Literally, the first week, I was like coming home with a big bag because I found a shop that was open. So my resourcefulness kicked in, and I'd like to keep that. But I think that's a really hard question to ask because we're still going through it. Yeah. Chaka, what would you have done?
Do you know what?
Beautifully.
Pass the buck. Nice one, kid. Do you know what? I would have said, not just to myself, I think collectively would be, don't try and figure it all out straight away. Don't put yourself under, not under so much pressure. Like, I read this thing, but bear with, I'm not going to go on a massive tangent. I read this interview with Nick Cave at the very beginning of all of this, and I'm not necessarily a big Nick Cave fan, but he said this really interesting thing where he said, whenever a crisis has hit, creativity has been his way to to kind of work through it. You know, he's become the most sort of productive in tragedy and whatever, be it personal, be it collective. And actually what he realized, and I don't mean this as grandly, by the way, so when I say the word artist, I'm not saying that we're all artists, but he said, what I realized when this hit was that actually the role of the artist sometimes is to sit and to observe and to feel it. And I'm not saying our role is not a passive role, our role is a very active role, but also we have to be kind to ourselves in the fact that this was, to use Jim, I know, unprecedented. We used it twice now on this chat. But I think we are problem solvers, and I think we wanted to get to solutions really quickly. Yeah. And I think it took us a couple of weeks to go and really lean back into the fact that we genuinely don't have a fucking clue. And all we can do is react with integrity, heart, compassion, love, listening, to ourselves, to everyone, and I think that still applies now, without sounding like a Hallmark card. I still think we're in that now, and there'll be a time where it starts getting firmed up a little bit more, but I still think we're in it. So if there was one bit of advice I'd give to all of us, to myself, to all of us, would be like, breathe. This is going to shock you to your core, and you're not going to be able to figure out the answer. And I'll tell you something else for a little shit. 10 weeks later, you still won't know the bloody answer. And I'll tell you what, 10 weeks on, you still won't bloody know the answer. We will do at some point, we'll know something more, but that's probably it.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a good answer. I think that's right. I think, you know, it's kind of like, don't predict, just react in the best, most human, beautiful way that you possibly can. But you're right, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because we are an industry of problem solvers. Great, what are we doing? Shit, I've got no idea. And physical health, kind of like, you know, then it merges into your mental health, and it's just been like, oof. So I think that, you know, ask us in 3 years' time when somebody's written a book about it, and we'll quote from that. But yeah, at the moment it's still a little bit raw.
Jim, do you have any piece of advice or something you want to take over?
I don't think I can add much more eloquently than what's already been said, over and above, you know, the understanding thing that, you know, if having a little bit of hindsight, if you call 12 weeks hindsight, to look back on how I've dealt with it and the kind of wild oscillations of my sort of mental well-being and how I've looked at things, and just to understand that everybody's going through this at the same time. Like, there is literally no point of reference for this for any of us. Like, and so everyone will go through their different challenges and stages of this at different points, and just to show up with understanding, I think, and empathy.
Yeah. I've heard some people say that after crisis, sometimes you see a creative revolution or renaissance, whatever you want to call it. Laura, do you think that we're about to see that? Are we going to see a creative revolution in advertising?
We will, for a number of reasons, right? It's actually a really exciting time, not belittling what's going on, to be in advertising, because our role is to take complex messages, make them simple, you know, engage people with brands, which is building the economy. Like, now that the really tough stuff is kind of starting to lift, it's almost like it's our responsibility to restart the economy now, right? And get these brands back on their feet and stop us having like the worst recession known to man and all of these things. Like, we actually have a proper part that we can play in that responsibly. But you know, enough has changed. You know, I know Grey is never going to go back to working the way it is, because we are, at the end of the day, a business which is only as good as the people. And what it's done is it has really opened out the opportunity for us to work with our people in different ways and do different things. And to Shaka and Vix's point, I have no idea what that looks like yet, because we don't, but we're willing to try some things to see if there is a better, see what that better way is for everyone to be working and creating. And then I think you're going to see that a lot. And therefore it opens out all these new stories and ways of telling stories that we didn't have before. It's not the lady ironing her shirt to go to work in the morning, and like we've got a million different ways of telling stories about like working, about family, about shopping, about whatever it is, connection. Everything's changed, and that is in a way really interesting, and I don't think we'll get them right all the time, but I do think it's got to be a better place than where we've been for I would say the last 5 or 10 years, in terms of maybe getting a bit lazy or a bit formulaic or a bit burdened down by the economic pressures and what have you. I'm really hoping this will kind of explode stuff out a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good note to end on. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I could talk to you guys all day, but we have some more sessions after this. I just want to say thanks again to our panelists. Thank you to our partners, the Wall Street Journal and Barron's Group. Um, Thank you so much, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Britt.
Bye.
Bye.